Welcome to our video exploring the enduring legacy of Steve Jobs, a visionary whose impact continues to reverberate throughout the world of technology and beyond. In this exploration, we delve into the profound imprint left by Jobs, examining not only his contributions to the realm of innovation, but also the lasting lessons and inspiration he imparts to us all. Join us as we unravel the multifaceted legacy of a man who dared to think differently and left an indelible mark on the fabric of our digital age. As usual, a like and subscription to your channel will help the channel grow. Don't hesitate to take a few seconds to support the creators of this video. We'll get to the main content now. Apple, the child molded by the hands of Steve Jobs, has become the world's largest technology company by market capitalization. Under his leadership, Apple has shaped and dominated the world of technology for over a decade. From the simple iPod, the revolutionary iPhone, to the latest Vision Pro glasses. Touching them, we still feel an endless source of inspiration that Steve left behind. What else do we receive from this great man? Those are the lessons from Steve. How he managed the company, how he learned, how he created and developed products. How he approached innovation and risk all are things that we can learn from Steve Jobs. He was not just a founder and a leader, but also a guiding spirit, inspiring millions of people around the world to pursue their passions and relentlessly seek perfection. The day Steve Jobs bid farewell to the world was a rare day when the whole world shared a loss. Profile pictures were changed to the black Apple logo, tweets with "I sad" flooded, and bouquets were placed in front of Apple Store locations. It turns out that in the minds of many, the image of Steve Jobs was larger than that of a manager or an inspiring figure. The legacy of Steve Jobs perhaps goes beyond the iPhones or the praises about him. Steve's legacy is the story of his life. In this article, let's review some snapshots of Steve's life. What made the man who admired the great musician Bob Dylan so much? First, let's start with the question, what was Steve's childhood like? Childhood. Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, USA. Steve's father was Paul Reinhold Jobs. He grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. Paul did not finish high school, but dropped out to become a machinist, and at the age of 19, he officially joined the Coast Guard. Steve's mother was Clara. She was born in New Jersey, and the whole family had to move to downtown San Francisco when Clara was still a child. Paul met Clara after being discharged from the Coast Guard. Both of them built a happy and model family, as in the 1950s. However, there was one thing that made their family life incomplete: Clara couldn't have children. Therefore, they adopted Steve. From a young age, Steve Jobs knew the truth that he was adopted, and the thoughts revolving around this story greatly influenced the young Steve. At the age of 6-7, a neighbor asked Steve, "You were adopted because your birth parents didn't need you anymore, right?" Jobs ran home and cried bitterly. But his adoptive parents looked him straight in the eye and said sternly, "We specifically wanted to adopt you." Abandoned, chosen, special. Those concepts became a part of Jobs' personality and even in his lifestyle. His close friends believed that these traumas drove Steve to want to control everything he created. But it was also these pains that helped him become more independent, helping him choose a different path to rise above what life gave him since birth. Not only did Paul Jobs provide Steve with confidence, but he also passed on his love for mechanics and repairing machines to his son. He pointed to a bench in his garage and said, "Steve, from now on, this will be your workbench." Steve was also impressed by his father's skillfulness and professionalism. He liked to do everything perfectly. He cared about even the parts that others usually didn't notice. Working with his father in the garage gave Steve his first experiences with electronics and machines. Besides, Paul's meticulous nature also influenced him a lot, nurturing in Steve the passion to create products with exquisite designs. Next to Steve's house, in a row of houses, lived a neighbor who greatly influenced Steve. His name was Larry Lang. Larry was an engineer working at HP, whom Steve described as an engineer knowledgeable about electronics. On one occasion when Steve went with Lang, he was introduced to a microsystem and wireless speaker. This was completely contrary to what his father had taught him, that a microphone always required an electronic amplifier. That was the first time Steve realized a truth, that he was smarter and more sensitive than his parents. Not long after, he discovered that even his parents recognized this truth. Steve grew up in the struggle of two feelings, that of an abandoned child, and that of a special person. Perhaps this had a great impact on the formation of Steve Jobs' personality later on. University. As Steve matured, he increasingly appeared to be a special individual. In his final years of high school, Steve experimented with a strict diet, consisting only of vegetables and fruits. This made him thin and slender like a whippet racing dog. He sported short hair down to his shoulders, a scruffy beard, all accentuating his crazy personality even more. 17 years ago, when Steve was adopted, Mr. and Mrs. Paul and Clara had committed to sending him to university. So, they saved up enough money, not much, but enough for Jobs to attend after graduating from high school. But things didn't go smoothly. Steve joked that he wouldn't go to university, causing his parents to react strongly. Steve didn't even care about choosing a school, including Stanford, a school nearby, and likely to offer him a scholarship. Steve was Steve. He had his own boldness. And he was determined to enroll at Reed College, a liberal arts college in Portland with one of the highest tuition fees in the United States. His parents, of course, objected because of the financial barrier. But both eventually relented to Steve's ultimatum. If not Reed, then he wouldn't go to any other university. In college, Steve delved deeper into the world of spirituality. He admitted that he was deeply influenced by many books on this subject, especially Ram Dass's Be Here Now, a book that guides readers into the world of meditation and various hallucinogens. Steve's connection with the Eastern spiritual world, especially Zen Buddhism, was not just a passing passion. He pursued it wholeheartedly as part of his inherent personality. We can see this through Steve's simple and exquisite aesthetic sense. Alongside spiritual books, vegetarianism was also something that Steve pursued throughout his college years. The book that sparked this habit for Jobs was Diet for a Small Planet. According to his friend, Steve at this time lived solely on Roman meal cereals, often buying a large box to last him a week. This habit of Steve's became even more extreme when he read Mucusless Diet Healing System. He believed that eating only fruits and vegetables would help prevent the body from secreting harmful mucus-forming substances. This meant that he even stopped eating Roman meal cereals or any kind of bread or grains. These manifestations of madness, such as studying spirituality, meditation, using stimulants, and vegetarianism, were seen by Steve as efforts in the quest for enlightenment of the era. Shortly after, Steve felt that Reed was not what he had imagined. He felt bored being forced to take required courses. Jobs only wanted to study what he wanted, such as dance classes, to satisfy his creative mind and have the chance to meet girls. Indeed, Jobs didn't want to leave Reed. He just wanted to be free from courses he wasn't interested in. Surprisingly, Reed agreed to that request. The student management supervisor, Dudman, allowed Jobs to audit classes and stay in the dorms even when he stopped paying tuition fees. From that moment on, Steve was free to attend the classes he wanted. Among them, there was one course that honed his delicate nature and directly influenced Apple's devices in the future. That was calligraphy. I learned about writing with and without feet, about customizing the spacing between characters, and how to make decorative letters more impressive. Calligraphy is beautiful, classical, and rich in artistic value, something that science cannot grasp. And I found it very attractive. This is what Steve shared about the calligraphy course, also a clear evidence that Steve's personality is a harmonious intersection between art and technology. Apple, the idea. Steven Wozniak was a friend Steve had known since high school. Although was 5 years older than Steve, both shared common interests in technology and music. In terms of electronics design knowledge, was ahead of Steve by many steps. At an age when Steve was still puzzled about the carbon microphone that his father couldn't explain, had already used transistors to build a communication system. If Steve was the soul, then was the heart that created Apple. The 1960s was a period of technological explosion in the United States. Military contractors, followed by electronics companies, microprocessor manufacturers, electronic game designers, etc., created a new culture associated with modern technology. But there were also children who felt lost during this transitional period, which created a rebellious culture on the other front lines. Initially, tech enthusiasts and rebellious kids didn't get along well. Many members of the counterculture movement viewed computers as suspicious and potentially taking away the freedom of life. However, by the early 1970s, society underwent a transformation. As many analysts demonstrated, computers were gradually becoming a symbol of personality and freedom. The giant corporations of the time treated computers in a conventional manner. But the counterculture folks, the stoners, the sandal wearers, viewed everything differently. They were the ones shaping the 21st century. In January 1975, the first personal computer was introduced in a magazine. It was called the Altair, consisting of a block of parts soldered onto a simple circuit board. But tech enthusiasts saw the Altair as a harbinger of a new era, the era of personal computers. 2 months later, witnessed this computer. The Homebrew Computer Club was seen as the convergence of the tech movement and counterculture. The club's first meeting took place on March 5, 1975, where a session was dedicated to the introduction of the new Altair computer. Attended this meeting, which was one of the most important evenings of his life. Saw the technical specifications for the Altair's processor. From there, he felt enlightened. He set about designing a terminal device with the keyboard and a remote connection-capable screen to a mini-computer. Wozniak used a processor in the device, giving it some capabilities of a remote mini-computer. Keyboard, screen, and computer, all integrated. The entire idea of the personal computer came to me, he said. That night, I began sketching on paper what would later be called the Apple I. Jobs was very impressed when he heard about his computer. Jobs eagerly set about completing some memory-related parts. However, was naive and believed in the philosophy of the computer club. The theme of the club, he said, is to help others. But Steve was different. He didn't accept the view that Wozniak's inventions were for free. That was the difference between the two. Always positioned himself as average, but Steve always made room for his ambition. Ultimately, was convinced by Steve, and both began to work on their first commercial computers. The fully integrated computers, designed to be user-friendly to make a strange device friendly and necessary for every family. At the time, with superior technical ability, with Steve's astute leadership and twisting reality vision, both opened a new era of personal computers. The birth. Apple computer. Who would come up with such a funny combination? It doesn't even make sense. That's Steve. That name reflected him. Placed next to the word computer, this name brings a friendly, cheerful, and lively feeling to an inanimate machine. On April 1, 1976, Apple Computer was founded with 3 shareholders, including Steve Jobs, Steven Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne. But shortly after, Wayne left, leaving the Apple duo at the helm. Woz was responsible for the main technical operations, while Jobs would handle business-related matters, marketing. The Apple I was first introduced by Jobs and Wozniak in a presentation at the Homebrew Computer Club. Presented what made Apple superior to rival computers, a computer with an easy-to-use keyboard and all integrated components. There were very few audience members paying attention to Apple's product. but among them was Paul Terrell. Paul, the owner of the Byte Shop computer store chain, was quite impressed with the Apple I and decided to order 50 after discussing with Jobs. And thus, Apple Computer had its first order. Jobs' home in Los Altos became the assembly point for 50 Apple I circuit boards. All hands were on deck. Jobs, Woz, high school friend Kotke, Jobs' ex-girlfriend Elizabeth Holmes, along with Jobs' sister Patty. Steve didn't just make 50 computers for Paul's order, but also made an additional 50 to sell to friends, and 100 to retail. The wholesale price that Jobs and Paul agreed upon was $500 for each Apple I, but when sold retail, Jobs raised the price to $666.66, which created a conflict with Woz, who believed they should only sell them at a price sufficient to cover the production costs. Steve was different. He wanted high profits, and the $666.66 price he chose was 3 times the production cost. The success of the Apple I stemmed not only from being one of the first personal computers on the market, but also from how Jobs and Wozniak approached sales and marketing of the product. The $666.66 price set by Jobs may be controversial, but it also reflects Jobs' business strategy, creating value not only through the product, but also through how the product is introduced and marketed. This helped create an image of Apple as a breakthrough company, ready to challenge conventions and produce products that are not only technically powerful, but also superior in design and user experience. The conflicts. Drawing lessons from the Apple I, Steve Jobs and his colleagues created the revolutionary Apple II computer. Jobs recognized the importance of a complete package computer, integrating all features. The Apple II performed its task well. 16 years after its launch, nearly 6 million Apple II devices were sold, paving the way for the personal computer industry. Apple had become a pioneer company in Silicon Valley, with Steve still serving as chairman and CEO. However, Steve seemed to struggle with the increasing responsibilities. Pressure caused him to display anger and behave childishly. Steve wouldn't hesitate to label products made by employees as junk. Jobs also had hygiene issues. He maintained a strict vegetarian diet, believing it would reduce the need for frequent bathing. Occasionally, to relieve stress, he would soak his feet in the toilet, an unpleasant act. Tensions also rose in the relationship between Woz and Steve. Woz despised Steve's childish behavior and conflicts. During the design of the Apple II, Woz clashed with Steve over the number of slots the machine should have. Woz insisted on 8 slots for users to plug in peripheral devices, while Steve wanted only 2 slots. Eventually, Woz's idea was accepted, but he felt his power was overshadowed by Steve in the company. The desire for control over Apple and Jobs' reckless attitude towards power were real concerns for the board of directors. Steve might have lost control while carrying the burden of a rapidly growing Apple, or perhaps this was just his nature. The departure. In 1985, Apple truly became a giant in the electronics world. Devices like the Apple II, Apple III, ISA, and Mac gained popularity, along with Jobs' reputation. However, beneath the glittering success, shadows of disagreement and conflicts began to emerge. The Macintosh was born amidst these conflicts. Steve used what people often call reality distortion field to create a Macintosh computer with sleek aesthetics and powerful capabilities. He wanted everything to be done by January 1982. A year ahead of schedule. "That's insane, it can't be done," was the reaction of the Mac development team to Jobs' demand. But strangely, the team seemed trapped by Jobs' request. One day, Jobs barged into the room of an engineer developing the Macintosh operating system, complaining that the system was booting too slowly. Engineer Kenyon began to explain, but Steve interrupted him. "If it could save someone's life, would you shorten the boot time by 10 seconds? Steve asked. Kenyon said he could. "So, if 5 million people use Mac, and if we can save 10 seconds each time they boot up, we can save 300,000 hours a year," equivalent to hundreds of lives saved every year. Kenyon was truly impressed, and weeks later, he came back, and the Mac booted up 28 seconds faster. Steve continued to use this method to illustrate impact on a larger scale. Many believe that this behavior originated from Jobs' childhood. As a child, he distorted reality with his stubbornness to get what he wanted. As he grew older, Steve used this ability more in his work. Jobs' use of reality distortion field in work wasn't just about imposing his will on others. It was also about inspiring belief and passion in individuals. He always found ways to stimulate creativity, encouraging his team to see what could be, not just what is. Wozniak understood this. Jobs' reality distortion field was shown when he thought of an unrealistic plan for the future. Like when he told me he could design the breakout game in just a few days. We understood that it was impossible, but somehow he made it possible. Or, in the process of creating the iPhone, Apple made a breakthrough by introducing a touchscreen mobile device. A technology removed from the physical keyboards still favored by competitors at the time. Not just at Apple, Steve knew how to apply this behavior to his partners. In the journey to find a partner for manufacturing glass for the first-generation iPhone, Jobs met with Corning glass leaders. There, he was introduced to a glass called Gorilla Glass, with high durability and strength. However, due to lack of market, this glass was discarded by Corning. Nevertheless, Jobs requested Corning to produce as much glass as possible within 6 months. Initially, Corning's leadership was surprised, but then, Corning gathered all the best scientists and engineers to turn Jobs' request into reality. Steve was right. His reality distortion field was indeed effective. But only one problem arose. Jobs seemed unaware that this behavior was also distorting his own soul. In Steve Jobs' soul, the obsession with perfection wasn't just a personality trait. It was a core principle guiding every decision. However, within Steve, there were many contradictions. If you chase 2 rabbits at the same time, you won't catch either. Steve pursued perfection both in Macintosh and in running the company, and that was inevitable. Those who stood by Steve, including Wozniak, recognized this issue from the launch of Apple I. Apple needed an experienced CEO to develop, not a Steve who often got angry or cried during arguments. As Macintosh Computer developed, tensions between Jobs and Scully, then CEO of Apple, escalated continuously. Scully was appointed CEO of Apple in 1983. Steve Jobs invited him from PepsiCo to help Apple transition from a startup to a strong corporation. Scully was extremely impressed by Apple's working culture on his first visit, a simple and relaxed atmosphere like Steve's style. Jobs also liked Scully's understanding. They quickly became soulmates. But not long after, Steve realized it was all an illusion. Jobs believed Scully wasn't a product person. He didn't make efforts to understand the core of the products they were creating. Conversely, Scully believed Steve focused too much on minor details on devices, thinking that this obsession would backfire. They also clashed in their treatment of employees within the company. When the Macintosh disappointed by achieving only 10% of projected sales, Steve became frustrated, blaming everyone. He used those around him as outlets for his anger. In contrast to Scully's calm demeanor, he avoided direct confrontations with Jobs and maintained harmony, caring about relationships. The tension escalated as Jobs and Scully vied for control of the Mac development department. Realizing that hiring Scully as CEO was a mistake, Steve conspired to overthrow him with the board of directors, but it was too late. A year before, Jobs and Scully flew to Cambridge, Massachusetts to visit Edwin Land, the founder of Polaroid and Steve's idol. Jobs said, "All Edwin did was help change millions of poor people's lives, and they kicked him out of his own company." Now, Scully had done the same to Jobs. Friday, May 24, 1985, the Apple board meeting took place. The coup plan was leaked, and Jobs had to confront Scully directly to determine his fate. Jobs insisted Scully didn't understand anything about Apple and that Scully should leave the company. "I want you here to help me grow, and you haven't helped me at all." Under pressure from Steve, Scully lost his composure, started stuttering, and took a big gamble. He conducted a board survey, asking, "Me or Steve, who do you vote for?" Even now, Steve still felt angry when recalling, "He was so cunning. Only a fool would vote for me in that situation." Indeed, although everyone admired Jobs, they all chose Scully. Jobs was kicked out of his own company. He walked out of the room with no one following him. In the following days and months, Jobs sat still at home. For hours on end, he played Bob Dylan's tape, especially the song, "The Times They Are a-Changin'." The Return. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was a special deity. He created mankind from clay, nurtured them, and taught them everything from astronomy to agriculture. Prometheus loved his human offspring more than his father, the god Zeus, so he stole the sacred fire to give to humanity. This act angered Zeus. Consequently, Zeus punished Prometheus by chaining him to a rock, where an eagle would come daily to eat his liver, which would then regenerate at night to repeat the pain. Eventually, Prometheus was rescued by Hercules, a hero of humanity. If anyone empathized with Prometheus, it was Steve Jobs. Like the Titan who brought fire to humanity, Jobs brought technology and products to the world that changed how we live, work, and communicate. Both faced opposition and punishment from higher powers, Prometheus from Zeus, and Jobs from the Apple board of directors. The similarity between them also lies in their deep love for their offspring. Prometheus loved humanity, a creation he made from clay, and sacrificed himself to bring knowledge and power. Jobs, although not creating humans, created breakthrough products and invested all his love, passion, and vision into them. Both Prometheus and Jobs endured suffering for their choices and actions, but they are also remembered as innovators and bringers of light. Prometheus's suffering under the daily torment of the eagle symbolized the price creativity sometimes has to pay. Similarly, Jobs went through dark times, from being fired from Apple to the challenges of building Next and Pixar. And finally, just as Prometheus was rescued by Hercules, Steve had the opportunity to return to Apple. "Elvis's comeback couldn't evoke greater emotion," said Jim Carlton, a reporter for The Wall Street Journal. The audience rose to their feet, engulfed in applause, cheers, and excitement, as they witnessed Steve's return to Apple after more than a decade. He returned to save the company, to rescue his child, teetering on the brink of collapse. Since Steve walked out of that boardroom, Apple seemed to have lost its creative spark. Revenue plummeted, competition intensified from Microsoft and other PC manufacturers, putting the company in financial turmoil. Apple's products no longer made a significant impact in the market. The company realized they needed a new source of inspiration, a strong leader with a breakthrough vision to bring the company back to the top. Who else but Jobs? At this time, Jobs no longer wielded power as before. He returned initially as a part-time advisor and continued to run Pixar, the animation company he founded after leaving Apple. But amidst an aging board of directors, Steve's voice still carried a special power. Steve's first visible impact upon his return to Apple was perhaps the Think Different campaign. It was special right from its name. Proper grammar would have been think differently. But Jobs wanted to use different as a noun. Aside from the TV commercial aired, Steve also conducted one of the most memorable print ad campaigns in history. Each ad featured a black and white portrait of a historical figure with the Apple logo and the phrase, "Think Different." Most of them were Jobs' personal idols, representing creativity, risk-taking, and betting on oneself to work in different ways. Steve once again ignited the creative fire that Apple had lost. He delved deeper into his child. Steve Jobs became the interim CEO of Apple in 1997 and officially held the CEO position in 2000. With power in his hands, he made changes to shape Apple's future. He cut a slew of inefficient projects, focusing resources on a few breakthrough products. First and foremost, the iMac was launched in 1998, with its unique design and vibrant colors, quickly becoming an icon of innovation and helping to restore Apple's spirit and image. After the success of the iMac, Jobs continued to lead Apple through new and daring projects, including the iPod, iTunes, iPhone, and iPad. Each product opened a new era for the industry and consumer habits, from how we listen to music to how we communicate and access information. The success of these products not only solidified Apple's leadership position in technology, but also turned the company into one of the most valuable brands in the world to this day. Conclusion. It would be presumptuous to conclude anything about Steve Jobs' character, for his greatness transcends what words can describe. But if one were to choose an image to represent Steve's character, it would be a picture of the yin and yang circle, an image Steve encountered while contemplating the book, Be Here Now. At first glance, the picture may seem to represent contradiction, like how Steve viewed the world in binary terms. Either this product is great, or it's junk. Either you're a genius, or you're worthless. He once criticized former President Obama, saying, "He has a problem in leadership because he doesn't want to upset or anger anyone." Well, that's not a problem I have. Steve was stronger than that. He had a unified ideal when viewing everything. And this display of strength was the motivation to push his employees. Jobs elicited excellence from those around him by challenging them, sometimes to the point of harshness. He created an environment where everyone had to face the challenge of striving to become the best version of themselves. Besides the contradiction, the juxtaposition between black and white, between two extremes within a subject, the image also evokes the importance of harmony. Steve is the harmony between a brilliant engineer and a true artist. His hands transformed rough, raw technologies into exquisite devices. And Apple inherits that spirit fully in every product they create. From the curved lines on each iPhone to the fonts displayed to users, they are imbued with fragments of Steve Jobs' personality, passion, perfectionism, quirkiness, ambition, artistic sensibility, audacity, and even his obsessions. Jobs was also a master storyteller, with his adept storytelling skills. He knew how to create a story around a product, turning it from an inanimate object into an emotional experience, connecting with customers on a profound level. The commercial for the Macintosh line in 1984 is a prime example, where the audience, upon first viewing, jumped up, screamed, and punched the air with enthusiasm. But if you strip away those glittering layers, Steve Jobs, still a child burdened with the ultimate desire for creativity, endless passion for pushing the boundaries, remained. On August 24, 2011, Jobs had to accept the reality that he no longer had the strength to return to the CEO position at Apple and handed over the position to Tim Cook. In the final chapters of his life, Jobs struggled with an incurable cancer. But even in that situation, he always kept thoughts about which technology he could improve. So, what is Steve Jobs' legacy? Surely, each individual will have their own interpretation when fully approaching the story of his life. Even far into the future, people will look back on Jobs' life story. A story of a great inventor, a true artist, or a boy with boundless passion. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you in the next videos. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and have a fantastic day.